Hey everyone, let's talk about the literary analysis essay. So right here I'm looking at your list of assignments. I'm going to click on the literary analysis essay and we're going to go through the instructions for just a minute. So for this week what I'd like you to do is take your 3 race paragraphs that you've written over the past 3 weeks and use them as body paragraphs to create a 5-paragraph literary analysis essay. The question you will answer in this essay is, how are imagery and/or symbolism being used in the adventures of Tom Sawyer? Now, you've already done the work of analyzing the importance of the imagery and/or the symbols in the adventures of Tom Sawyer when you wrote your race paragraphs. What I would like you to do is watch this video to figure out how to turn those race paragraphs into the full-length essay. This shouldn't take you very long if you have written and revised your race paragraphs over the past 3 weeks. If you have not written them or not revised them based on the comments that I gave you, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get ready to do this. So first of all, let's look at the essay outline and remember the steps to writing an essay. We know that it's broken into 3 parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. This is a 5-paragraph essay assignment, which means we're going to have an introduction paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph. And again, the hope is that you can just drop your race paragraphs in to be those 3 body paragraphs, and you won't have to do a whole lot of writing. So for the introduction paragraph, there are 3 steps or components: the hook, the link, and the thesis. We've been over these a lot, so this should just be review. In the hook, you're going to get the reader's attention and get them to want to keep reading your essay. This should be about 1 to 2 sentences. In the link, you're going to explain how the text connects to the link by giving the title, the author, the genre, and a brief summary of the text. And then in the thesis statement, you're going to state the focus of the whole essay. The focus of the whole essay is that question that's listed in your instructions. How are imagery and/or symbolism used in the adventures of Tom Sawyer? So in your thesis statement, you're going to make some kind of statement about how imagery and/or symbolism are used in the adventures of Tom Sawyer. For each body paragraph, you have to have a claim, which is the first sentence where you make a claim about a piece of imagery or a symbol. Then you have to have the concrete evidence, where you set up the evidence by explaining what's going on in the text beforehand, do your quote, cite your quote, and then follow that with the commentary where you explain why the example of the imagery or symbolism is important to the story. Now, you've done almost all of this already in your race paragraphs. The only thing that we might need to look at changing in the race paragraphs is the very first sentence, and I'll show you that when I do the example in just a minute. Once you got your 3 body paragraphs done, then you need to write a conclusion paragraph. This is a really short paragraph. The first thing you do is restate your thesis statement in different words, and then make a real-world connection by explaining why this topic is important. So this outline is going to be attached to the assignment. You can reference it as you write and should reference it as you write, because remember, if any of these steps are missing from your essay, then I'm going to be asking you to rewrite the whole essay in order to get credit for it in PowerSchool. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go to Google Docs and I'm going to start a new document. I'm going to call this document Literary Analysis Essay. And then I've got Google Docs open on 2 tabs to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to toggle over to this other one. And you'll see in my documents I have my race paragraph 1, my race paragraph 2, and my race paragraph 3. So I'm going to go to race paragraph 1. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it into my, not into my title. I'm going to paste it into my literary analysis essay document. Then I'm going to go back over here to race paragraph number 2. I'm going to copy it and paste it into my literary analysis essay document. And then I'm going to open race number 3. And paste it into my literary analysis document. Now, of course, I want to make sure that each of my body paragraphs is indented at the beginning. And now the majority of my essay is already done. So I've got my body paragraphs in here already. I chose to do the example on I Lived on Butterfly Hill because I didn't want you guys to feel tempted to write something very similar to what I wrote in the example if I used The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. So I used I Lived on Butterfly Hill instead for the example. In the example, I'm also using both symbolism and imagery. Some of you wrote about both in your race paragraph, so I wanted to show how you could incorporate both into your essay. And it's actually a little bit easier if you wrote all your race paragraphs about just imagery or all your race paragraphs about just symbolism. So I'm going to show if you wrote your race paragraphs on both topics, just in case, because that's a little bit harder to do. So I now need to write an introduction and start with a hook. So something that gets my reader's attention that has to do with the imagery and symbolism that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to say the best kinds of writing are when the author is able to make a connection with the reader. And then I'm going to link that hook to the text that I'm talking about. I'm going to say this is true in I Lived on Butterfly Hill. A novel by Marjorie Agassiz. So I have done title, I Lived on Butterfly Hill, author, Marjorie Agassiz, and genre, novel, in that one sentence. The other part of the link is the brief summary of the text. The novel tells the story of 12-year-old Celeste and her experience as a refugee during the Chilean coup in the 1970s. Okay, so remember the summary needs to be brief. You're not giving a whole ton of details about what the story is about, just a one-sentence explanation of the overall story. The novel tells the story of 12-year-old Celeste and her experience as a refugee during the Chilean coup in the 1970s. And then the last thing I need to put in my introduction is my thesis statement, which says what I'm going to be talking about in the rest of my essay. Well, I'm going to be talking about symbolism and imagery, so I need to write a thesis statement that says that. Agassiz uses both symbolism and imagery in her novel to make connections with her readers. All right, my introduction is done. My body paragraphs are done. The only thing that you might want to look at in your body paragraphs to make a change for is that first sentence of each body paragraph, because you wrote them as separate paragraphs, not pieces of one big essay. Those first sentences are probably going to sound very repetitive. So if I look at the first sentence of my first body paragraph, it says, one symbol in I Lived on Butterfly Hill is. The second one symbol in I Lived on Butterfly Hill is. And then the last one says, an important piece of imagery in I Lived on Butterfly Hill is. So I've got three sentences that all start pretty much exactly the same. I'm going to keep the first one because it's fine to say that the one time. And I'm going to change the second one to make more of a transition between my first paragraph and my second paragraph so that I don't have three paragraphs starting the exact same way. I don't need to keep saying the title of the book. By this point, my reader knows the title of the book. When we wrote the race paragraph on its own, it was a standalone paragraph, so we had to say the title of the book so the reader would know what we were talking about. But now that we're putting it into an essay, it's not on its own, so we don't have to keep saying the title of the book over and over. So instead of saying one symbol, I'm going to say another symbol, and I'm going to cut out the title, and I'm just going to say in the book. So then I've got one symbol in I Lived on Butterfly Hill is, and then the second paragraph starts, another symbol in the book is. So they're not saying exactly the same thing. And then here I'm going to change an important piece of imagery on I Lived on Butterfly Hill is to The author also used imagery to connect with the reader when Celeste describes how the general is making changes to the country. All right, and then my body paragraphs are done. I've just edited those claim statements a little bit so that they sound better all together as one piece of writing instead of sounding like separate paragraphs that don't go together. I've written my introduction, and now I just need to add my conclusion. First thing I'm going to do in my conclusion is restate my thesis statement. My thesis statement says Agassiz uses both symbolism and imagery in her novel to make connections with her readers. So I want to say that same thing again, but using different words so that we don't have a lot of repeating in our essay. So I'm going to say something like, the imagery and symbolism in this novel are an excellent way to help the reader connect to the story. They're basically saying the same thing, I've just changed the wording. Now, the last thing I need to do in my conclusion is make a real-world connection. Kind of been making the real-world connection the whole way through by talking about how imagery and symbolism help readers connect to the story. But so here I'm just going to explain kind of how that happens. Both imagery and symbolism exist in the world around us, and so we easily recognize them. In stories, and their presence helps the characters to seem more believable. All right, and I'm done. So guys, this video so far has been 12 minutes and 20 seconds, and that includes my explaining everything to you, which means that if your race paragraphs are finished, you could probably finish this entire essay assignment in 15 minutes or so. It's putting the race paragraphs you already wrote together, tweaking the first sentence of each one a little bit so it's more of a transition and less of a standalone paragraph, and then writing a 3 to 5 sentence introduction and a 2 to 3 sentence conclusion. Then your essay is done. You're ready to turn it in. So hopefully you've done all the prep work with your race paragraphs and you're ready to complete this final step. If not, again, you will need to set aside more time this week to either revise those race paragraphs or write them if you haven't been writing them this whole time, so that you can include them in this essay. So I'm going to put this essay that I just put together for you guys up as an example attached to the assignment. You will notice that in the concrete evidence portion where I'm supposed to be citing evidence for each paragraph, I've just put quote in quotation marks, and that's because I don't have my I Lived on Butterfly Hill book with me here at home, so I wasn't able to actually go into it and find quotes. It is not acceptable for you guys to do that in your essay. You need to have actual quotes from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. You need to be quoting them correctly and citing them correctly using this format. So at the end of the quote, in parentheses, the author's last name and the page number, and then the period for that sentence goes after the parentheses. Not at the end of the quote, after the parentheses. That's the correct way to do it. Remember, if there are big inconsistencies between the essay that you turn in and the outline, which explains the steps for how you're supposed to be doing this assignment, I will return it to you and ask you to revise it before I will give you credit. So please put time into making sure that you do your best possible work the first time so that you don't have to do it again. If you have any questions, send me an email or come to my office hours and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Happy writing!